Estuve muchísimo tiempo buscando esta entrevista con Greg Mottola, el director de SUPERBAD, lo que es para mí una de las mejores comedias teen de todos los tiempos. Con él hablamos de un montón de cosas referidas a los orígenes de esta película que definió a otras, como por ejemplo Booksmart, donde hay entrevistas que pueden ver, también Good Boys, que hay entrevistas que pueden ver. Hablamos sobre cómo fue elegir al trío principal para protagonizar esta película, sobre qué fue lo que vio en Emma Stone para elegirla, para ser Jules, y un montón de cuestiones más, como por supuesto el origen de McLovin. Todo en este imperdible informe sobre Superbad.
We now return to Mira Akien and Contre with our latest interview.
When I see it referenced on Twitter or something and people remember certain lines, it really makes me happy. Yeah! Seth Rogen and his writing partner, Evan Goldberg, wanted to do a reading of it, and Seth read the part of Seth, and Jason Segel read the part of Evan, and a bunch of other very funny, good people like David Krumholtz and friends of theirs and people from the show read it. And I thought, this is the funniest script I've ever heard. And I said to Judd afterwards, if you're looking for a director, please think of me. Well, it wasn't until about 3 or 4 years later when Judd was able to set up the movie. It was considered too filthy, too R-rated, almost X-rated for most studios, until things started to shift a little bit, and Judd had a lot of power and respect, so he finally convinced Sony Pictures to do it.
I can't imagine what you're going to do without each other next year. Evan told me you didn't get into Dartmouth. You going to miss each other?
No, I don't miss each other.
Yeah, I'm going to cry myself to sleep every night.
When I first heard the script read, I thought, oh, the way into this is the final scene in the movie. The realization for the audience that actually, when they go to college, their friendship will never be the same again. Yeah. So this is the end of something for them. And they've been each other's kind of like, support system for so long. And that's what all the acting out is about, is they're scared about losing this friendship and going out into the world again, into the world for the first time. And so I thought that's the anxiety underneath it all. And so I just had to keep an eye on that, so that they were, the fights and the playing of it was that there was an element of that underneath it, that they were freaked out.
Tonight is our last party as high school people. You know when you hear girls saying like, oh, I was so gone last night, I shouldn't have slept with that guy. We could be that mistake.
My only hesitation with Jonah Hill was that he was in his early 20s. And I said, let's just make sure before we read Jonah, because we all knew Jonah was brilliant and funny. Before we read him, let's just make sure we've exhausted all the kids who are actually the correct age, who are, high school age or closer to it. Just because I wanted to be careful not to make one of those teen movies. Or, you watch teen movies and TV shows and you think like, yeah, this is kind of fun, but everybody here, should be on their second marriage. They're all like in their 30s. So, and Jonah, it's a very baby-faced guy. So ultimately, after we read a lot of people and then read Jonah, it was just, no offense to the other people who read, but nobody made that character alive the way he did. Not even Seth Rogen. Seth's amazing. Seth obviously gotten too old to play the part, but Jonah brought to it a level of vulnerability that made that whole character make sense. That, every time he said something terrible or filthy or offensive, Jonah's vulnerability would come through, and you felt like, oh, this kid doesn't know what he's talking about. This kid is scared. This kid is not toxic masculinity incarnate. He is trying to understand how to live in a world where teenagers are about toxic masculinity, and that's all the bragging and showing off, and it just got so much funnier and so much more human the minute Jonah did it. Michael Cera I'd worked with on Arrested Development, so I had done 3 early episodes of that show, and I knew Michael was brilliant and one of a kind. And so we got them in a room together, and it was like, yeah, this is the funniest comedy team, in decades.
I love you.
I love you.
Why don't we say that every day? Why can't we say it more often?
I just want to go to the rooftops and scream, I love my best friend, Evan.
Christopher Mintz-Plasse is an interesting story because Allison Jones is so hardworking. She and her assistants went to various high schools in the Los Angeles area, up into the valleys, down to Orange County, And any school that had like a improv group or a comedy club or something, they put up signs saying, we're looking for an unknown to play this kid. And we read, we were reading other kids who were young actors in the business, but no one was making us happy. And most of the people, I think, understandably, were playing that guy like, I'm the nerd, I'm the weirdo, I'm the picked on, runt of the litter kind of character, which nerds often are in movies. Chris, who did do improv at his high school in the Valley, came with his friend who was auditioning, and Chris wasn't necessarily going to audition. He was like, I don't know, this sounds stupid. he was there, and his friend auditioned, and Allison said, talk to him, and got to know him a little bit, and said, you should do audition. And he's like, nah, all right. And he came in, and she texted me or emailed me right away and say, you got to watch this kid. She emailed me the audition, and I was like, oh yeah, he is different than everyone else. And he's, never acted in front of a camera before, but he has something really funny and interesting. So then we had Jonah, Michael, and Chris read together and improvise together. And Chris started improvising. He was like talking over Jonah, and he was pushing back on Jonah's insults. And he was not the pushover nerd who was the picked on kid. He was acting as if like, I am by far the coolest person in this room, and you guys are my little runt assistants.
I look like a McLovin too.
What the fuck does a McLovin look like? Have you ever seen one before?
No, but I can be McLovin.
Jonah was like, after he left, Jonah was like, what the hell? That's not the character. What is he doing? And Judd, to his credit, said, Jonah, the more you complain about that kid, the more you're giving him the part. And because that's the dynamic that we wanted. We wanted a dynamic that was interesting and real and had tension to it, and like that they really drove each other crazy, but the way friends do.
You're like the coolest person that's ever talked to me, and I blew it.
Come on, you didn't blow it. I think maybe...
What did you see in her, like, to pick her for this movie?
Well, she was one of the only people that our executives at Sony weren't sure about. She'd never been in a movie before, and it's crazy to say this, but they were like, is she just like the right fantasy type hot girl that, he's like, he's dying to get with? I think they thought she had too much character. She was too interesting. And I said, she's amazing. I mean, she's got tremendous charisma and this great voice and incredible comic timing. And I don't know why she hasn't been in a movie yet. It makes no sense to me. I mean, she's done a lot of TV. And Judd said, you guys should have lunch with her. And so the execs went out to lunch with her. And by the end of it, they immediately called and said, she's got the part. She's amazing. She's incredible. She's a star. So, it wasn't like they were jerks and said she has to have like bigger boobs or be blonde or whatever, but they were kind of like, oh, she's interesting. Is that the right way to go for this? Because they're thinking of sort of, teen movies that have a kind of, teen fantasy aspect to them. But I was like, oh, but she's, trust me, she's great. And she is great. And obviously that's been proven by many, many films better than Superbad.
Becca?
We did a table read for the executives once we had our main cast that went so incredibly well. I knew that they were basically going to leave us alone. They were just like, go make this thing. Don't go over budget, and they did. I mean, they were supportive. They had notes here and there, but they were they'd come to set just to laugh. I mean, there was one, like at the very beginning, they said, could you guys just make sure you do a take of every line that doesn't have any cursing in it? And I said, you'd have to give us another like 2 weeks of shooting. I mean, every single line has cursing in it. That's the point of this movie. It's like, we tried it and it was just like, we can't make our days and also stop to do it and expect it to be any good. So it's like, it was for the airplane version or the TV version. And it was just so hard to pull off that, I've never even watched the TV version because I'm sure it's they did find like occasional takes to cut in where they changed the movie to try and get all the cursing out of it, and I was like, I don't want to see that movie.
Enjoy your remaining years.
I will. Enjoy fucking Jules.
I will.
I mean, in any project with Judd, including Undeclared, and I'm sure this was true for Freaks and Geeks, and it's true for all of the movies he's directed and produced for the most part. There's a lot of improv. I'd say there was maybe a little less on Superbad than we did on Undeclared, only because the script was so good. But any moment that there was, you know, an inspired idea, or a space where someone wanted to try something, I always let them, because these guys are all really smart writers. I mean, Jonah's like a fantastic writer, so he would come with jokes he'd already thought of. He would have flashes in the moment. And Michael's unbelievably inventive and you know, and Michael could take a line and turn it into something completely different than anyone else would have done with it. And certainly, you know, with Seth and Bill Hader, there was a lot of improv with those guys. And so, you know.
And I gotta look over at that. Looks like the most fun I've ever seen in my entire life. And it's BS, excuse my language. I'm just saying that I wash and dry. I'm like a single mother.
There's stuff in it, like the scene where Jonah's talking to his teacher and he's trying to get out of trouble with her. I'd say 90% of that was Jonah's improv.
Wait, you changed your name to McLovin?
Doesn't even have a first name, it just says McLovin.
I am McLovin.
Well, there's a good story behind McLovin as the name, because Seth and Evan they were friends since childhood, and they dreamt of making movies, and they came up with the premise of Superbad when they were, I think, 15, and they wrote a version of it, and the only thing that survived that version, everything else was thrown away, was the name McLovin. That's the only thing that made it from the first teenage drafts of the script. And it's kind of perfect because only a teenager could come up with something that dumb. It's so, you know, it's like, we never even considered changing it or trying to find a joke that was better, because it was just so perfectly stupid that there was nothing could be more absurd. And yet you could see a dumb kid thinking that's cool and a good idea. My only contribution to the actual physical prop of the license was I suggested we make him get a license from Hawaii, because I looked at all the different licenses from around the country, and I thought the rainbow was funny, and I thought Hawaii's funny. It's like, who, like, he's from Hawaii? How did he get
McLovin! What the fuck?
Officer Slater, is that you?
You ran away from us. Why'd you run away from us? Michaels, get up here.
He's a minor, so his mom had a guardian or a parent had to be there at all times. So you know, when it's something sensitive like a sex scene, and you know, even with adults, you really have to talk it through and discuss with everyone what it's going to be. And now they've introduced the whole concept of a intimacy coordinator, which I think is a good thing. It actually makes it easier, because it's an awkward thing. Like, what if people are supposed to appear to be naked, but they're not? What are they actually wearing? How much are we seeing? What are we not seeing? So, you know, I kind of designed it so the actual sex moments would be close-ups right above the girl and right up at McLovin. So that, you know, basically Chris was making sweet love to a camera. You want to be in on their faces, because you know, it's a moment he will never ever forget. So it's happening sure. 99% in his brain.
What is that?
What are you talking about, man?
Dude, is that blood?
The girl who leaves period blood on Jonah Hill's leg. Yeah. That was like the only scene the studio said, can we really do this? Is this just offensive? And Seth and Evan said, well, yes, that argument is fair, but it happened. And we were there when it happened, and it happened to our friend. And we thought it was the funniest thing that had ever happened. So, you know, I thought, like, you know, I wouldn't want to do something that made women feel bad or just sort of fed into this sort of childish reaction that men can have to women's bodies and their but then I thought, well, it is true. I mean, it did happen, and these guys are not mature, and showing Jonah having an immature reaction to it is funny, and also tells you something about his character and that he needs to grow up, and he hasn't grown up.
Oh, shit. I'm gonna fucking throw up. Someone period on my fucking leg. Oh, shit.
One of my favorite screenings of Superbad was an early screening, a test screening, and Bill Hader sat next to me. And when it was over, he said, "Look at the girls behind us." And I snuck a look over my shoulder, and these two girls were crying and hugging each other. And they were like two high school girls. And like the movie got to them, like the message of like friendships don't last forever, really broke them up, even though they were laughing at all the gross stuff the prior, 100 minutes.